I'm King Link and it's time for the Humble Choice June 2022 review. I'm quite excited about this month. I actually previously played 3 of these games and I'm really looking forward to talking about them. As always, I play each game for an hour on Twitch and I now will tell you what I think about the games, who's going to enjoy them, and who should probably check them out. Humble appears to have settled in on 8 titles to cover each month, so let's get started and see how they are.
Captain Amos, what is the meaning of this?
You're letting our enemy escape, Captain Carroll. I will not show the same mercy. Fire the missiles!
Star Wars Squadrons, the Star Wars game I always wanted. When I was a kid, I grew up with Star Wars TIE Fighter and Star Wars X-Wing and always wanted to fight in those epic space battles. Well, in 2020, EA answered that desire with the amazing Star Wars Squadrons. This was a budget title for $40, but still is an amazing experience. This game is also even better if you have a VR headset and a flight stick. The VR on this takes a great game and makes it legendary. That being said, there are a couple issues I have. This is a budget title coming out at $40, which was a good price point, but it still lacks content. There's also a handful of multiplayer modes and maps which are great, but there's been limited post-launch support for the game. There's also only 14 missions, which are quite enjoyable, but a little bit short, though I do appreciate playing as both the Rebels and the Empire in a variety of ships. And because of the limited support, the multiplayer is very weak. It's not dead, but it's not healthy. I have a feeling EA couldn't or somehow didn't want to monetize this game for some reason and let the online die, which is sad. Pick this up if you have VR or you always wanted to fly either an X-Wing or a TIE Fighter. The experience here is amazing and you can get so close to the large ships and feel a real sense of the size and scale. This is a shorter experience, but it's one I can't forget. And yes, I know this is an origin key, I'm going to mention it here, but I will dig into it far further at the end. Just so no one thinks I'm pulling a fast one, I did play this on my Steam version of the game because that's actually the version I prefer.
I'm prepared.
Phoenix Point, Year 1 Edition. XCOM 3, but not exactly. Phoenix Point was developed by Snapshot Games, with the lead designer being Julian Gollop, who is well known for helping found the original XCOM series. I don't know much about the validity of those claims, but they do seem correct, and Phoenix Point isn't shy about that comparison. Much of this game feels like the modern XCOM titles, and that's quite reasonable. Phoenix Point does seem to live up to the ideas behind the series and presents a new game with a different enemy from a virus plague. The game did come out at the end of 2019, but just a weird time to talk about that. However, there are a few solid changes here as well. Instead of a hit percentage, there's a new hit system involving the targeting reticule that can use a bit more explanation in the game, but I prefer it to XCOM, though it does change up the game quite a bit. At the same time, there's also the ability to use vehicles as part of combat, and I was loving the destructive abilities when the attacks were available. Pick this up if you like XCOM. This is a large, beefy game. It feels like XCOM but done in a different style and I am curious to play more, though I do have to admit I came nowhere close to the end of the tutorial because there's a ton involved here, which is expected with the genre. However, the experience I had was worth continuing.
This can't be a coincidence.
Call of the Sea, a puzzle game set on an island. Call of the Sea is a puzzle game that also feels like it's a bit of a walking simulator. Players will explore an island, finding a ton of small items to pick up and examine, many of which are involved in elaborate puzzles. Truthfully, I was only able to solve about 2 or 3 of the puzzles during my time with the title, but all of them were solid, with the third one really taking the majority of the time. The issue with Call of the Sea is the puzzle I got stuck on. It stumped me for a very long time. However, after getting a single, very minor hint online, it actually all clicked into place, but that was after stumbling around for 20 to 30 minutes straight. I found one solution, but there's actually another solution or explanation for that puzzle, and I actually kind of appreciate that, but I can also see this game will challenge players. It's the writing and voice acting that deserves a special mention, because this is a compelling story from the first hour, and I want to see where it goes. There are a few tropes, of course, but there's also a lot of mystery and intrigue. Pick this up if you like challenging puzzle games and solid stories. This feels like an absolute hit with the understanding that the puzzles might be extremely hard to solve, but good puzzle games will be somewhere on that scale between challenging and obscure, and I think this is more about difficulty so far than poorly designed puzzles. I'm actually planning on coming back to this as soon as possible, hopefully this weekend.
You seem like the only normal person in this whole circus.
Gamedec. A great elevator pitch, but pretty much only that. Here's the idea. You're a game detective and you're going to go into multiple different video games and solve crimes in a futuristic cyberpunk world. That sounds great, and I'll even ignore the fact that it's just a point-and-click adventure game rather than an action game, or really anything else. There was a good concept at the core here. The problem is Gamedec tries to highlight its writing as a major element and pushes the player to appreciate the vast quantities of dialogue. This isn't Disco Elysium, but it's definitely trying to be Disco Elysium at times. The problem is that it's just really blunt with its expositions. It feels more like a 13-year-old chuckling about the ability to discuss adult games than an interesting depiction of whatever the subject matter it's trying to reach is. Oftentimes it just wants to drop strange words when a better term exists. Why call yourself a game deck if game detective exists and you have to say that often enough anyways? For an example on the writing though, the first case involves the son of a powerful executive that's currently being on a multi-day binge in the virtual world, and he appears with an erection early on, and that's just delivered far more bluntly than you can imagine. Pick this up if you like poor translations or potentially know a different language. The studio is located in Poland, and I see a lot of Italian and Polish sites rate this game significantly higher than others. It's likely just a translation issue that puts the game in the state it's in, but still a state that is hard to accept it as is if you're going to be playing it in English. Just as a note though, I did put a single voice line in the audio, but the majority of the text in this game is non-voiced, with characters only doing a single intro line. Pumpkin Jack, a competent platformer, but that's kind of it. The minute you start playing Pumpkin Jack, you realize you're playing a solid platformer. The controls work well, the double jump feels just right, and the levels give you the right amount of hints on where to go. Then you suddenly find a secret item where your character does a little funky dance. This is all part of the DNA of a typical platformer with a bit of a collectathon as well. But Pumpkin Jack is just that, a solid platformer that doesn't stand out. The art looks acceptable and the level design is okay and the story works, but again, that's it. There's not a lot to buy with the collected items and the game isn't that long either, but overall the game just feels, well, okay. This isn't necessarily a bad or a good thing, it's just average, and that's probably the biggest issue I have with Pumpkin Jack. I feel compelled to say that this was created by a single developer, which is impressive, but as a gamer, this is a $30 title and my mind keeps asking why I wasn't playing something like A Hat in Time instead. I want to see more by this developer though, whose name I'm going to butcher, but Nicholas Myasiner, because he delivered a finished product, but maybe next time take a little more time with the design as well? Pick this up if you love 3D platformers or need a new one after playing most of them. The issue here is more about how much competition there is in the genre and space and how many have done this better. The game also throws achievements at the player. I earned 10 out of the 33 in under 1 hour. Still, I want to stress, this isn't a negative review. It's just not a positive one either. Siege Survival, Gloria Victis, This War of Yore. Siege Survival is a medieval tale where a bastion is under siege by enemies and the player has to survive, assist the knights fighting on their behalf, and scavenge goods in the large town as enemies hunt them. It's a concept that made me wonder before I realized this is just a different version of This War of Mine. The thing is, this is a different take on the tale. Siege Survival focuses more on the more direct representation of a siege. Players will give arms and feed soldiers defending their encampment. The enemy will sometimes bombard the bastion with trebuchet fire, and players will manage their soldiers' wants and needs. While there is a depression system and pain, it's not so recognizable either, and that's a good thing. Pick this up if you want a more relaxed version of This War of Mine or just want a simple survival game during wartime. Where This War of Mine tries to make a direct statement about war, Siege Survival is more of a pure game, and I really want to thank my follower Royale for that point because it really focuses on the difference between these titles and he got to it far faster than I did. This isn't meant to say one is better than the other though. There's room for both a thought experiment and a game in this space, and in that area I think I prefer Siege Survival as This War of Mine depressed me quite a bit more, though I fully understand why someone may choose that one over this title. I Am Fish. Wacky zany physics for you to stream. I Am Fish is by Bossa Studio. Just to give you a list, they made I Am Bread, Surgeon Simulator, as well as the VR version and the sequel. These are games that were made popular by YouTubers reacting to them, and I Am Fish is definitely in that same vein. Players have just enough control so that things are going to go wrong, and it's usually due to trying to master the strange controls. I Am Fish does give the player a simplified control as well as a full Bossa tier control scheme, just titled Bossa Mode. Most of the time I Am Fish works well, though some parts of it are extremely frustrating, namely a specific jar that the fish gets trapped in. There are 4 different fish, each with special abilities, and there's an interesting level design. At the end of the day though, this is a game designed to be observed by others rather than just playing alone. Pick this game up if you like any of the previous Bossa titles, Goat Simulator, or similar games. I've never been sure if the goal of these games is to be enjoyed by streamers or played by end users, but I think the type of player who will enjoy I Am Fish already knows that they will, though I will say this is probably my favorite title from Bossa. Superhot Mind Control Delete, the better version of Superhot. I enjoyed the original Superhot, but when the developer released Superhot Mind Control Delete, I found the version of Superhot I always wanted to play. Normally I would say a roguelike could never beat a well-scripted narrative, but in Superhot Mind Control Delete's case, that's the only exception I have for that rule. The original Superhot was a simple idea. Time moves when the player moves. Superhot Mind Control Delete uses the same format, but pushes players to beat escalating levels of challenge, battling against enemies in a procedural format, and even giving players bonuses to assist in tackling the waves and rooms of enemies. Though after only a couple of mistakes, players will be reset and have to tackle a new randomized set of levels. It's the same gameplay that made the original Superhot popular, but done in a way that will make every run of a level as intense as the first time. Pick this up if you enjoyed the original Superhot. Technically, this was given away to people who owned Superhot before this one came out, but if you somehow don't have it and enjoyed the original, or at least the concept of it, I recommend checking this title out. I put in over 12 hours into this title and I was extremely happy with the experience. And with those 8 titles out of the way, let's take a look at something from the Humble Choice collection. This is a game that you can check out if you subscribe to Humble Choice at any time in the future. This month we're going to be talking about Next Space Rebel. Be your own SpaceX. Next Space Rebel combines 2 things, launching rockets and being a social influencer. It's a weird mix, but Next Space Rebel pulls it off by focusing on a simplified building program. This game will draw comparisons to Kerbal Space Program, but it's doing something a bit different with more of a focus on giving players strange goals to try to accomplish, rather than attempting to simulate realistic physics. There's also a pretty strong storyline that evolves out of the player trying to accomplish various goals and collaborating with other creators, but then grows into a far more serious subject matter as the game goes on. Also, some of the challenges are a bit out there, a few being more trial and error than a specific build. But overall, I enjoyed this game quite a bit, putting in about 8 to 10 hours or so on Game Pass so far. Pick this up if you want a simplified version of the Kerbal Space Program. If your goal is to launch satellites or fly to the moon, this might not be for you, but if you like to just launch rockets and oftentimes watch them fail in horrible ways, well, Next Space Rebel is exactly what you're looking for. With that said, let's talk about the bundle, and I feel there's a lot to say. First off, it's worth repeating over and over again so no one's surprised, Star Wars Squadron is an Origin key. I'm a Steam purist, and while I can understand an Epic key once in a while, I just don't like Origin or the EA app at all. I think the key is less valuable because of that. Some people won't care, and that's understandable of course, but if you expect the games on Steam, this one's gonna upset you. Now the bundle itself is quite fresh, though Star Wars Squadrons again is an issue as it was previously part of the Amazon Prime free games, so some users might have it from that. Superhot Mind Control Delete was free to people who bought Superhot before July 16, 2020. It also is currently part of the Fantastic Diamond Collection for May 2022, which is active as this airs, but will end within a couple weeks at the most. I do want to say that 3 games stand out this month, which are Phoenix Point, Star Wars Squadrons, and Superhot Mind Control Delete. If you're interested in all 3 of them, then this is a pretty good deal. Even wanting 2 of them, or maybe even 1 of them will be a good pickup, but it's hard to ignore that many players already own the titles that they'll want here. The rest of the bundle is just not as interesting as these 3 titles. Granted, there are 3 pretty major games in this list, but I feel like Superhot and Star Wars already saturated their markets. With all that said, let's just move on to the tier list, and as always, we'll use the American school system, A through F, and has been the case for quite a while, we'll just skip F because nothing truly deserves to be there, as much as one game kind of tried. The D tier has a single title this month, it's Gamedec. I'll show the dialogue from when the player first interacts with the main victim of the primary case, but this game consistently struggled with its writing. That's going to kill most text-heavy games. I really wanted to like this one and give it a shot, but I had no interest in returning after playing it, and this game should have appealed to me. Damn. Moving up to the C tier, we have 2 games. The first is Pumpkin Jack. As mentioned, this is the most average game on the list. It's exactly what I look for in the C tier. Not better than a C, and of course not worse than 1. Just okay. And that's Pumpkin Jack. The other C tier game is I Am Fish. I'm still not sure who's going to enjoy this or if this is viable outside of streaming. I know some people enjoy this game, I know there's a small market for the genre, but I also question if it's just impulse buys or if it's a decent sized community for this type of game. I really don't have those answers today. What I do have is the tier list up to the C tier, and it's good so far. So far with 3 games down, 5 to go, and that's a good sign for the bundle as a whole. Moving up to the B tier, we have the bottom of B tier, Siege, Survival, Gloria, Victis. As I said, this is a more gamified version of this war of mine, and I also prefer that. There are several interesting mechanics in the system, and the scavenging is both intense and impactful. Really, I think the only problem this game had was the title. Gloria Victis really doesn't fit. And the top of the B tier is The Call of the Sea. It's the game that hooked me the most and made me want to play more. I love the art design, the mystery, and the experience so far. I know puzzle games are hit and miss, and it's entirely possible the puzzles become impossible before long, but I also got a huge sense of joy from just solving one of these puzzles that I was struggling with. I really want more. And that's what we have after B. Honestly, I think of B as titles that are worth playing, but maybe not worth buying the entire bundle on their own, which only leaves the very best. I'm sure most of you know what they are, but let's see them. The bottom of the A tier is Star Wars Squadrons. I probably would have put this as the best game of the month, but it's the origin key that knocks it down a huge amount. Yet the game is still good and worth checking out, and if you have a good VR setup, this is easily my top suggestion of the month. Man, this game is so frustrating to judge. The second best title of this month is Phoenix Point. It's XCOM, period. If you like that, you'll be able to put in at least 30 hours into this game with no problem. It comes with a decent amount of the DLC in it, though there is more out there. I also think that the changes to the formula are strong enough here that it will stand alongside XCOM as equals one day. And the best of this month is Superhot, Mind Control Delete. I put so many hours into this title, and if you've heard of Superhot, you probably already know this series is great, but the Mind Control Delete version takes it to all new levels. Even playing again for this video makes me want to dive back in and take down wave after wave of faceless red enemies. And that's what I have for this month's choice. Now, I'm sure like always there's going to be some people who don't love the selection, and for them I'll say fair enough. However, I'm going to throw out an alternative. Currently, Humble is offering a Capcom bundle, and for 20 bucks you get 9 titles, including most of the Devil May Cry series as well as 2 coupons. Pretty good deal for anyone who needs to fill out their collection. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, and if you want to hang out, I'll throw up a Discord link in the description, so come hang out. Find out when I rarely stream or just discuss anything on your mind. If you want to help the channel, commenting, liking, and sharing the video always helps, and stay safe out there. I'll throw up my link to my video on Superhot, that design review that I have, and my latest video on Game Pass with a ton of games on that service as well. See you next time.